Well, let's face it, buying your first home in today's market can be challenging, and you need every advantage that you can get. Now, the timing of your purchase, and I'm not just talking about timing it around your life, but also timing it with the swings in the housing market, that can not only take a lot of stress out of the process, but it can also save you big dollars and gain you massive leverage in your own custom home buying process. So it's time to reveal another insider secret that's going to make home buying better for you. Play that music.
How to Buy a Home educates, protects, and connects first-time home buyers to qualified vetted realtors in their area. Whether you're looking for DIY information or step-by-step guidance, How to Buy a Home is the #1 resource for first-time home buyers.
What is happening, my How to Buy a Home is I'm David Sidoni, your host and your first-time homebuyer coach since 2019. Today, I have lots to explain to you about how you can use your timing. That's something you can do to help gain advantages and decrease anxiety. Now, if you're brand new to the podcast and you're looking for answers for other things, and you're just trying to figure out how to get over the overwhelm of this whole process, well, pause this episode and go to episode 400. That's where you're going to start with the 10 steps that every first-time homebuyer needs. And after you listen to that, you're going to be ready to rock, because there's a lot more for you in the podcast library. You can find your personal step-by-step guide. All your journeys are different, so all your guides are going to be different. There's not one magic episode, not one magic playlist. Build your own playlist from the topics in the episode guide for all the questions you have, and I guarantee you're going to find a path so you'll figure out that you can do this. We're going to put that episode guide in the show notes for you. Like today's episode. Maybe you'll listen to a few different episodes and you'll be like, oh, I wonder what kind of timing it is. Well, here's the answers. Just like prices, interest rates, your realtor and your lender, those things can have major effects on the overall value you get in your home purchase. Well, that value can also be affected by the timing of when you do it. There can be big impact with timing. The housing market, it has annual seasons, and that means that the timing that people buy a home, it's pretty much the same every single year. It's a basic principle. Occasionally, sometimes sellers have to sell their homes immediately in some of the off seasons, like they got a job transfer or some other random life event. But most of the time, sellers plan putting their homes on the market when it's most convenient for their lives. And the pattern breaks down like this. Spring, that's the highest selling season with the most amount of homes on the market, 35%. Summer's next, usually about 30%. And then fall is somewhere between 15 and 20%. And winter is at 10 to 15%. And obviously, these numbers, they make sense. There's a reason they're historical, because they're predictable. Spring and summer tend to be most convenient for everyone. You've got better weather, school considerations for anybody with kids, and most of the time aren't super stoked about putting their home up during the holiday season in the winter because they want to focus on the family. And so specifically with first-time home buyers, for the last 20 years, what happens is people maybe think about it at some point in the year, and then if it gets to fall and winter, they wait. And I'm telling you, the week after the Super Bowl, that's when my phone and my texts and my emails absolutely blow up every single year. Right after the Super Bowl. God bless America. And yeah, that happened again this year. But then there was a big change in 2026 to these normal historical patterns. And normally what I can do is I can help coach people, because each particular change in the timing with the seasons, well, those offer different first-time homebuyer challenges that you can prepare for. And there are also advantages in there that you can exploit. And what I'm going to do is explain to you how this normally works historically. And then I'll explain how 2026 is not following that historical pattern at all. But by learning how to work within any season, you're going to decipher, first of all, what's going on in your area? What season are you in? Because up is down and down is up. Some places it feels like a winter market, even though it's the middle of spring. So you'll learn how to use the techniques. Most importantly, learn how to exploit what's happening right now, which is these crazy, unusual, pattern-breaking timing anomalies, things that are going just different than we've ever seen in today's housing market. And that's going to be how you win. First, understanding the patterns, and then discovering that your particular timing fits into any of the patterns in your particular housing market. And then using all the knowledge you have to gain the most leverage. This year, all those patterns and predictability are out the window. But what you can learn when I explain historically what we usually get is that every season has trade-offs. Like in the spring and summer, those busy seasons, yes, you are definitely going to find more housing inventory for sale, which is good because that means more options for you to choose from. Choice is great. But of course, you're also going to face increased competition with more buyers out there. That's why for 20 years, I've been coaching my post-Super Bowl first-timers to get after the pre-planning. That means January, February, March, and April. The only goal is to know your numbers before you even think of going out and looking at any homes. We do an intense financial evaluation with the professional team, whether it's myself or one of the unicorns all across the country, because when June rolls around and you walk into a perfect home for you, many times, if things are following the traditional historical seasonal patterns, June's a crazy month, lots of competition, and you might walk into your perfect home and a unicorn's going to say to you, all right, man, if you want this one, we need to move fast. Now, if you're not locked into your numbers, when someone says that to you, bam, you feel like you're in a pressure cooker, stress, anxiety, panic. And without the pre-planning, those emotions, well, they're going to be real. But unfortunately, it could mean that you lose your dream home. So to maximize all you can from the trade-offs in any season, but especially in the spring and summer seasons when things are really busy, you got to do your prep work, because then you can shop with that luxury, that advantage of lots of choice, knowing that your offer is going to come in and probably do really well against the competition. You're going to be better prepared than the rest of the people out there, and your offer is going to go to the top, which means now you have the luxury of being able to look at multiple different homes, and even though there's competition, you feel like you're buying where there's only 2 or 3 people competing when maybe you're competing against 10 or 15. And then on the other side of things, the trade-offs, let's see how it works if you're in the fall or winter in the lower times when people are out buying homes. Less homes for sale and usually less buyers out there. And the spoiler alert is, in those seasons, you should know your numbers too. Fall and winter, yeah, you're going to have fewer homes to choose from, but you're going to have less competition, less buyers that are going to be competing for the same home as you. And the cool thing is, you know that people who put the homes on the market, especially at the end of the year in the winter, those folks have got to be more motivated. You're going to find a lot more of those people who have to sell, because in a perfect world, most people would have waited to spring to sell their home. And that little insider information, that's an opportunity for you. You're usually going to have more room to negotiate, but in any negotiation, you got to come in knowing where you are, because the person with the most defined position, they have the most room to negotiate. This is especially beneficial for those of you willing to buy a home that maybe needs a little work. Because if you fully understand that your cash available that you've got, and you know that months ahead of time, well, then you can start thinking about looking at homes that need some work, and you could do some remodeling, which means you could score a home well under market value and then turn the home into whatever you want it to be. And before I move on, let me give you just a little extra tip about the fall. In a regular market, fall can be one of the most underrated times to buy a home. You got September, October, and early November. It kind of creates this interesting sweet spot before we get to Thanksgiving. More inventory starts showing up in the summer, but the buyer frenzy from the spring, that's gone. And Realtor.com, they did a study in 2025, and they found that the third week of October was statistically the best time to buy a home, because there were the most homes available with the least amount of competition. And that matters for you first-time home buyers. And fall can feel a lot less stressful too, which means if you've got less competition, you probably have an opportunity to ask for more time for your inspections, or ask for time to really check out things to see if you want to get something repaired, or if you want to ask for a seller credit, because you don't feel like there's 20 people lined up behind you waiting to take the house if you hesitate for more than 6 seconds in the negotiations. So that means that fall is going to give you emotional control over the process. And for a lot of people, that's really valuable. And then, like I said, there's the winter, Thanksgiving through January. That's when most buyers disappear completely. People are distracted by the holidays, the travel, the weather, and the life, and the inventory drops because fewer sellers, no one wants to put their home up during the holidays. That's precisely why I have on this podcast for the last 2 winters called it the winter window of first-time homebuyer opportunity. And there are 2 reasons for that over the last couple of years. Number 1, The sellers that are on the market, they usually have a lot more to offer buyers because they're in a have-to-sell situation. Like they've got a job relocation or family changes or financial stress or just a crazy timing issue. Motivated sellers create opportunities for you, more flexibility, and then you get more control over the entire process. And the second reason is because in the spring, your buyer competition, they all come out of winter hibernation right after the Super Bowl. A lot of people, when they hear that, they're like, oh, cool. David said I need to wait till winter to buy a home. No, I didn't say that waiting is the answer. I really don't think that figuring and trying to time the market exactly is the way you're going to get the best deal. What I know is that preparing is your answer. And in 2026 and definitely going into 2027, since the usual seasonal patterns aren't happening, this applies more than ever. Right now, timing isn't the answer, planning is. Because who knows what's happening in your part of the world? That way you can make the best move in your best season, not the market's best season, because the typical trends that we see, they're thrown out the window. Trying to perfectly time the market, it's hard any year. It's impossible in 26 and probably going to be that way in 27. The better strategy is getting yourself positioned early. Get with a unicorn, get pre-approved, find out what your starting line is today, and then improve on your current buying power so that you can make the timing that's best for you. Know all of your numbers, build your own last lease ever, and study your market. Understanding your options before everybody else jumps into the chaos, that's how you win. Because the biggest mistake buyers make isn't buying during the quote unquote wrong season. The biggest mistake is not being ready when the opportunity shows up in your area. And right now, up is down and down is up. You know how things feel different with the weather depending on where you are on the globe? Well, it's the same thing in the United States, except with the housing market. Like right now, the South, it feels like winter, even though it's the middle of the spring. And the Northeast, where it's still possibly cold right now, it is freaking like July and August with low inventory and tons of bidding wars on every single home. We have 3 different housing markets right now. We've got a buyer's market, we've got a seller's market, and then we've got a flat market. And I actually just saw an article that I read today that said, so is 2026 a buyer's market or a seller's market? Well, they interviewed over 950 real estate agents, and the answer was, it's a weird market, and it's all completely regional. It depends on where you live. Overall, things are flat. But in general, some parts of the country are going up, but they're only going up 1 or 2%. Some parts of the country are going down, but they're only going down 1 or 2%. So the traditional and historical market fluctuations that we see with the seasons, they're not happening with the seasons. They're happening depending on what's going on with inventory in your area. So for many of you, that could mean opportunities could be happening in the next few weeks. And, I have seen people that think they're going to time the market. And then once they start working with professionals, they just start getting their plan together and their timing ends up being much more around their lives and what works for them because they know they're going to get the best deal possible. I've seen it happen over and over again. There was Brittany and Fred. They were from episode 372. They had a 3% down payment buying a $435,000 house in Dallas, Texas. Once they saw all their options and they were really solid and confident in their numbers, they ended up buying a home when Brittany was pregnant, timing their purchase around the end of their apartment lease, and they navigated and negotiated a seller leaseback so that they could stay in their apartment a little longer so it would work with the end of their lease. Oh, and of course, so it lined up with the pregnancy. And Brittany literally used the months of bed rest to learn, research, and get way more confident and knowledgeable with the entire process so that they could create all these different timing pieces that worked best for them. The thing I tell people all the time is there's never a perfect moment in life to buy a home. But with the right support team, you can do more preparation than you think, even when life feels the most chaotic. You don't have to do this alone. We had another one. Carrie was a listener who shopped in winter during Colorado when most of the buyers were waiting for the spring. And because she moved earlier and in that winter, she was able to negotiate seller concessions and buy a $400,000 home with only $12,000 out of pocket for down payment or closing costs. And Ella, she was a 19-year-old, thought buying was impossible, and she started preparing early, and she ended up buying a 3-bedroom home on 1.3 acres in 5.5 days. And it wasn't because she got lucky, and it wasn't because she was trying to shove this into some crazy timing. It's because she got prepared. Another great example is episode 456. That's where you find Kennedy. She's 24 years old, and she thought she'd need 3 years. But after learning her true options from her first-time homebuyer experts and advocates, she ended up buying her dream home, and it only cost her $6,500 all in, and it only took her 3 months. And she timed the market perfectly. Another example is Nick from episode 399, waiting years to time the market, only to find out once he finally talked to a unicorn team of advocates that showed him all his options, well, he could have bought a home for a lot less. And in fact, he ended up doing that, buying a home for, I think it was $3,700 out of pocket. He used low down payment options, seller credits, and proper guidance instead of waiting and thinking he needed 20% down and trying to time the market perfectly. When you stop reacting emotionally and you start moving intentionally, that's where you get the best deals. The buyers who win are usually not the ones with the most money. They're the ones with the best strategy and the best preparation. And in this weird market of 2026, where it's supposed to be a springtime market, but some places it's springtime, but homes are selling like it's winter. That means that your particular path, your particular timing, it could be completely different than your friend who lives 3 or 4 states away, maybe even 3 or 4 counties away. But the good news is you don't have to worry about trying to use that usual market timing. Just worry about making your plan to fit your best timing. However, just waiting for better timing to come along, that's not planning. I want to make sure you understand that. You need to start working and start preparing. You need to prepare. I've got the Last Lease Ever program from episode 440. That's a great way to start taking some baby steps if you don't know where to start. Because the real trick with the timing, that's to hire a team that's willing to work with you during your timing period, not someone who's trying to shove you in a home next weekend. People who want to prepare with you. And you know what? The great thing about it is they might prepare with you for 6 months or a year, and they don't know if you're ever really going to buy a home. And that works to your advantage. I mean, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? There's no commitment to buy. You just plan like you're going to buy a home, as if you might buy a home in 6 months. And then as you're going through that planning and you look at the numbers, if you see things you don't like and you've got the guidance of a professional team telling you, well, these are all your options. If you don't see an option that makes sense for you, the financing and timing doesn't look good, cool. Don't buy a home. It's just that simple. Too many people think they have to do the planning on their own, and then they reach out to someone, and then they feel, all the pressure. There's no pressure if you've done the planning. If you're looking at a trusted lender or a trusted realtor in the eye and going, hey, that monthly payment doesn't make sense to me, cool. Then they're not going to be able to convince you to go out and buy a home, so don't buy one. That type of thinking means that your planning creates the right timing for you, instead of you trying to look at the market for the right timing to drop on your head. And while you're doing that, it costs you nothing. And in fact, you've gained something. You get the knowledge and the confidence in the process. And if you never buy a home, then you've also gained the fact that you've created a better personal spending and savings plan for yourself. You've taken some control over your life. And I hear it here almost every single day. People who are trying to get ready on their own and wait for some better buyer things to happen in the market, that doesn't end up working out, because the reality is that you make the best timing for yourself, and you make it through the pre-planning with a team who shows you how to control the timing instead of reacting. So get out there, do your own research. There's a ton for 2026. I've been talking about these podcasts because there's some real math in here for those of you who are really trying to figure out, what do you want to do? Episode 426 is all over low down payment options and strategies. Episode 440 and 441. Can't recommend these enough. the rent replacement strategy, and the last lease ever program, which really breaks down to the babyest baby steps, something that you could do tonight if you wanted to start your path to home ownership. Not to make you go out and buy a home tomorrow, but for you to start taking the right steps. Episode 443 breaks down for you in today's market, what can you actually afford? And then 457 talks about buying or waiting. That was the original Should I Be Trying to Time the Market episode. That's where I talked to you about low inventory, and you understanding how much the inventory is up or down in your area is really going to depend the best timing for you. And then if you want the math, the real numbers, that's episode 460, rent versus buy. And then if you guys are in high cost of living areas and you really feel like there's no way you can make this happen, that's episodes 469 and 470. So with these varying markets throughout the country, the main thing that you need is a local experienced unicorn. Because any licensed agent out there can open doors for you, but your true specialized unicorns, they know how your particular first-time housing market is happening right in your area. They can show you the tactics and the tools and the things that are working right now for buyers. They can explain which homes are intentionally underpriced, because that happens. That's where the listing agent and the seller are trying to get a bidding war. And they also know when a house is going to be set up like that and sell immediately. And then they're going to know, hey, you know what? This one's actually not underpriced. This one's kind of overpriced. Let's go look at it, but we can wait a little bit. Then we can get the seller to be in a position where they want to negotiate. This insider knowledge and knowing how you should approach each particular listing, that is going to be huge, not only for your emotional well-being, but financial as well. So start your plan today. And you can do that. You can find a team that's going to coach you from the very early stages all the way through your home shopping and all the way through the negotiations and getting you the keys. And having them on your side is an extra advantage now, because who knows where you are right now? It could be a traditional spring market, or maybe you're sitting in a weird winter market, even though it's May, and your spring market's going to come right around Christmas. We don't know, because every market in every region is different. And that's why instead of focusing on the timing, focus on your planning, because then you can make it around your timing. So go ahead and get after it. Check out those episodes I mentioned before. If you've got individual questions, go to howtobuyahome.com. And there's a button to ask David. You can ask me something right there. You can also ask me for a unicorn team, because I'm telling you, doesn't matter if you're a year or two out, the sooner that you start, the better plan that you'll have, which means you can react to, or my favorite, create your own best timing. Because so many of you, you're probably so much closer than you think. You're going to be able to buy a home earlier than you thought. And hopefully, and probably most likely, before your next rent hike. You can do this.
Looking for more DIY education or your own personal step-by-step guidance through the home buying journey? Since 2019, How to Buy a Home has been the #1 resource for first-time home buyers. So visit howtobuyahome.com to get started.